Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hope you all are doing well. Yeah, here we are with session 3 of our virtual Arm to Urban Farm. Hope it's been a pretty good week so far for everyone. We've had a full day workshop here on my farm today, so we're just getting in. So brain's a little fried, but we had a beautiful day, and now all of a sudden we just got a warning that we're expecting 70-mile-per-hour winds, hail, and tornadoes.
Wow.
It's rolling in very quickly, so hopefully I'll still have power through the next few hours. But before we get started, I just want to check in with everyone to see how you're doing, and see if there's any logistical issues with Teachable, with your Zoom account or anything. And also if you want to have anything to say regarding last week's session, any comments or questions, now is the time. So feel free to unmute yourselves, or you can always use the chat as well. Everyone's good? Everyone's able to access all the files in Teachable? All right, and I did put this, just realizing we had homework. All right, we're here to help you where you're at, so, take it at your pace, but whatever we can do to help, please don't hesitate to reach out. And as a reminder, we do have the office hours on Tuesdays from 12 to 1. And also, I think hopefully you saw in the email that Seth from last week, he presented, he had a fever and felt afterwards that he just wanted to follow up with a few things regarding record keeping and financial planning. So he created a video just for us. So just to sort of help connect some of the dots and clarify a few things that he may have overlooked. So that video, Carlos, is that in Teachable or? Not, it will
Not
be.
yet, but I'll put it on Teachable.
Okay, so it'll be up there shortly. But feel free to check out the video as well for sort of clarification follow-up from Seth's presentation from last week. All right, so really pleased you're here again. We're still working on the plans for Baltimore, October 4th and 5th. And we'll keep you posted as the logistics continue to be worked out. And as always, we're just really grateful for Ray and Emily for joining us, and for the great partnership with the U.S. Botanic Garden. And just keep in mind, for any questions you have as well, they're here to help and answer questions that you may have. So, again, there's lots of help here, and just feel free to reach out and let us know how we can be of service. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to our first speaker of tonight. We have two speakers. The first is Rusty Romley with the National Agriculture Law Center located in Arkansas. And Rusty has been part of the Arm to Farm trainings for several years now, and presenting on sort of the legal aspects involved with starting and managing a farm. And so Rusty, I just want to welcome you, and thanks for joining us again, as we always appreciate all your help with these trainings. And I'll turn things over to you.
Hey, Andy, glad to be here. How long have I got?
55 minutes.
All right, that's what I wanted to check on. All right, let me go ahead and share screen here. All right. So like Andy said, my name is Rusty Rumley. I'm a senior staff attorney at the National Ag Law Center. A little bit about us and what we do and what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to kind of hit on a couple of the common topics that we get the most questions on here at the center. By no means is this an exhaustive list. I mean, we could throw in things on leasing if you're wanting access to land, contracting. There's different vendors have different requirements when you're trying to you're selling into stores. Some of those contracts can be hairy, and requirements on things like insurance, your product liability insurance. There's all kinds of things that you can touch on depending upon what type of farming operation you're going to get started. Like I said, I'm going to try to cover some of the ones that we get the most questions on. Just realize that this is by no means everything that there is out there. A little bit about the center. So I am an attorney. A unique thing about us at the Ag Law Center is that we are specifically forbidden from giving people legal advice. So we are here in a strictly informational capacity only. We work with farmers, we work with lawmakers on both the federal and the state level. So because of that, we have to be really careful what we say. So if you ask me a question and I rephrase the question, I'm not trying to duck your question. I'm trying to reword it so that I am providing legal information, which I can do, as opposed to legal advice, which I am prohibited from doing. Most of the stuff I'm talking about today, we have up on our website. It's nationalaglawcenter.org. I highly recommend it. It is a very good resource to bone up on some of the legal issues that you're going to run across in agriculture. On that left-hand side of the screen there, you see it says research by topic. If you click on that, it'll bring up 50 different topical areas on anything you can think of for regarding agricultural or food law. Food safety if you're selling prepared products, water law, probably not as relevant in the Eastern United States as it is the Western United States, but we cover a pretty wide range. Estate planning, business entities, if it relates to ag and food law, or environmental law, we try to cover it. So I'm going to try to talk about a little bit on business entities. I'm going to talk about zoning issues, and then landowner liability as the three areas that I wanted to talk about today. If you do have any questions, though, at the end of the hour, please feel free to ask me, whether it's on these or other topics, just realizing that I'm not licensed to practice probably in any of the states that you guys are representing. I'm licensed to practice in Oklahoma and Michigan. So so I always like starting out with business entities, and the reason for them is they're horrifically boring, and usually for legal areas, boring also equals useful. So it's kind of like you guys had the speech last week on keeping financial records. Boring, but really useful, and that ends up being a lot of the things that tend to be the most useful in life, or the things that are the most boring to learn about. Business entities, I always like to start people with business entities. You can create a business entity at any time while your farm is operating. I will say, however, that the easiest time to create a business entity is at the very beginning, when you don't have nearly as many assets that you need to transfer into the business. So you can create them at any time. If you don't have the time or money to start one the first couple of years, that's fine. Just realize, the longer it goes, the bigger you grow, the more complicated it can be later on. For most people, the reason why we want to do a business structure is for liability protection. Business entities can provide a lot of liability protection from people suing you if you've got the correct business entity selected. And most people don't realize this, but if you go out there and you start earning money on your own, you're not getting a W-2 from an employer, then you have a business entity. The state where you reside has been gracious enough to give you a business entity. The problem is those default business entities don't provide any liability protection. So this liability protection component really depends on what kind of agriculture you're getting into. If you've got a cattle ranch and you're in Western Montana and there's no one around you and there's no one to come on your land and get hurt, this may not be such a serious issue for you. But if you're outside the city of Baltimore and you're planning on having people come in and pick, berries off of your land, and you're gonna have lots of people coming onto and off of your property, a business entity is probably a really good idea. So, just the structure of what you're going to do on your business is going to kind of play in to see how important this business structure is going to end up being. Business entities are pretty cheap to use and set up. I know, just using Arkansas as an example, you can create an LLC. All you need is a computer, a credit card, and about 10 minutes. And it's a $50 filing fee to create a business entity. And then every year after that, you have to pay a $150 fee, a report, where they actually don't care what you do so long as you pay your $150 to file your report. But different states have different requirements on where you file, who you file with. We've got information on all of that on our website. Creating business entities is not too difficult to do. For attorneys, these things, not only is it a great tool for liability, for an attorney, business entity is a lot like a multi-tool. I mean, we can do a lot of different things with a business entity. They're a great estate planning tool. If you're wanting to use it for like a prenuptial type agreement, you're worried about the person you're marrying divorcing you later on, we can use business entities to help protect that. Worried about your kids squandering things, we can use business entities to protect against that. I mean, the business entity really is kind of a true Leatherman type tool for the attorney. So they're a great tool to have. This is one of those things I usually recommend most people work with an attorney to set them up, for the reason that they tend not to be very expensive, and the attorney can make sure that it's set up properly in the beginning, and it makes things go a lot smoother later on. As I mentioned before, whether you know it or not, you will have a business entity if you become a farmer. So there are many different types of business entities. I'm only going to talk about 3. I'm going to talk about sole proprietorships, I'm going to talk about general partnerships, and I'll talk about LLCs, limited liability companies. Some businesses provide no protection whatsoever. Some businesses protect some people involved, but not others. And then some business entities provide protection to everybody. The 3 I'm going to talk about, the first 2 provide no protection at all, and then the last one will provide protection to everybody. And it's pretty much the most common type of business entity that's getting set up anymore is the LLC. So how do business entities work? So this is kind of an odd way that business entities work. Business entities aren't intended to be a shield to protect you from liability. What a business entity is you're setting up a fictitious person that stands beside you and walks beside you in life. And if something ever terrible happens, you want to foist all of the blame off on that business entity. You don't want them coming after your house, your car, your personal bank account. You want them to go after whatever assets are in the LLC. So maybe it's an insurance policy. It could be some farm equipment. Some people will put their land inside the LLC. Other people won't. But whatever's inside the LLC, whatever assets are invested in the LLC, those are the ones that are typically at risk. And your personal stuff is separate. So that's how these business entities work. A couple of things when you're doing these business entities. You have to respect your own business entity. So what do I mean by that? I mean, when you're going to do things like pay bills or buy groceries or pay for the family vacation, you need to make sure that you keep separate records. There needs to be records for your farm, and there needs to be records for your personal business or for your personal life. If you have another business, I mean, I've worked with catfish farmers in Mississippi. They have a farming business where they raise catfish, and a lot of them also have woodworking businesses. So they have an LLC for the catfish business. They have an LLC for the cabinet making business, for the woodworking business. And then they have their own personal separate accounts that are completely separate from the other 2. This means separate bank accounts, separate checking accounts. Don't be using the business checking account to buy groceries for the family. There's ways to do disbursements from the business over to you, things like wages or dividends. There's a way to move money around. Just don't be treating it like it's your own personal piggy bank. And if you respect your business entity and you keep your records separate, if something terrible happens later down the road, you're hoping that a court's going to, use that same level of respect for you as well. So as I mentioned before, the 3 types of businesses I'm going to talk about today are the sole proprietorship, the general partnership, and the LLC. Realizing that there are many, many types of business entities out there, but by far and away, these are the 3 most common. Both a sole proprietorship and a general partnership basically work the same way. They are a default business entity. You never even have to hear the phrase sole proprietorship or general partnership. You don't have to know what they mean. It doesn't matter. All this is for a sole proprietorship, either one person or if you're married, spouses carry on some type of business to earn a profit, some type of endeavor to earn a profit. There's no separation between the person and their business. So if something happens in your business, not only can they take all your business assets, they can also go after all of your personal assets, and vice versa. If something happens, you get in a car wreck and it's not any way related to your farming business, not only can they go after your personal assets, they can also go after your farming assets because you are the business and the business is you. They're not a separate legal entity. Formation is easy. You don't have to file any papers. You don't have to pay any fees. You just go out there and you start earning money by yourself. That's all it takes, or with your spouse. That's all it takes to create a sole proprietorship. It ends when you stop working or if you die. I mean, that's the basic two ways these things end. Or you create another business entity would be another way that it would end. Management, if it's a sole proprietorship, you only got one person in charge, decision making's pretty simple. General partnership is almost the exact same thing, except it's got two or more people, and two or more people that are not spouses. So this could be you're working with your mother, your brother, your father, your best friend from college, someone that you were in the military with, anyone else in the entire world that's not your spouse. All it is, association, two or more people working together to earn a profit. You don't have to shake hands. You don't have to sign a form, nothing else. You don't have to mention the word partner or partnership. None of that matters. You just have to work with somebody else, not your spouse, and with the intent to make a profit. The scary thing about this general partnership is that there's this concept of liability called joint and several liability. So not only are you responsible for all of your own actions, you're responsible for all of your partner's actions that are taken in furtherance of the business. So if you have 3 or 4 partners, not only are you responsible for your own potential mistakes, you're also responsible for everyone else's mistakes as they relate to the business. And you could be personally liable for it. Not only can they go after your partnership's assets, they can also go after everybody's personal assets as well. It's just one big pool of money. I love using this case. This is an Arkansas case, but it shows just how prevalent this problem of general partnerships can be. This was a case out of Arkansas. This was a father and a son. Father was getting older, getting ready to retire. Son was kind of coming in to take over the family farming operation. They started getting into money trouble, so they had to go back to the bank and request more money to keep the farm going. Bank wanted both the father and the son to sign the promissory note. Father decided, you know what, it's been a good run, but I don't want to get involved. I don't want to put any more money at stake. So I'm out. Son says, I'm young, farming has its ups and downs. I want to take the loan and roll the dice. Bank refused to loan the money unless both of them signed. So somehow son takes the document outside, forges daddy's name on it, and then takes it back in, takes out the loan. And as you guessed it, their fortunes didn't turn around. So the dad ends up having to declare bankruptcy as well as the son. So this is actually a bankruptcy case. So in this case, when you ask for bankruptcy, and in particular Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you basically go before a federal judge, and we have this doctrine called the clean hands doctrine. You have to go in front of the court as an honest debtor. You can't have attempted to defraud any of your creditors. You just have to have bad luck. Things didn't work out. You want your debt forgiven. In this case, the court said, no, father, you're not entitled to debt relief. You don't have clean hands. Well, think about that. Well, what did the father do? Father didn't do anything. If someone broke the law, it was the son, because the son forged daddy's name on the promissory note. But in this case, they're partners. And the son forged his dad's name on the promissory note to take out more money to help the farm continue on, help the business continue on. So even though the dad was the victim here of, basically, it was kind of like identity fraud, basically. Even though he was the victim, he's also the partner of the person that perpetrated the crime. So daddy was on the hook and was not allowed to have his debts discharged in bankruptcy. So just kind of goes to show you that partnership liability is for real. I mean, even as far as making someone that's the victim responsible for it later on. So be really careful with these general partnerships. If you're going to be working with anybody else, anyone besides a spouse, I strongly recommend you get an LLC set up. This liability, this joint and several liability, it's not something you want to play around with. The third business entity is called the LLC. These things really haven't been around all that long as far as the law is concerned. They started popping up in the 70s. I think Wyoming was the first state that ended up creating this. So what this is, you don't have partners, you have members. You can have a one-person LLC or you can have a 50-person member LLC. Doesn't matter. You can have as many people as you want. The big thing is you invest assets into the LLC, and if something terrible happens, they go after the LLC. They don't get to go after your personal assets. These are separate legal entities, and you have to create them. Typically, for most states, it's at the State Secretary of State's office. We actually have a form on our website. If you go there, we've got the links to all 50 states where you create a business entity, and it's pretty easy to navigate through. You got to have a name for the LLC. You have to have an address and a person that, if someone does decide to sue you, this is the person you're basically going to serve process on. Most states require a report to be filed every year. These reports are generally really, really short. I mean, some of them are like a one-page PDF. Did you do business this year? Did you make money? Okay, remit your filing fee to this address. And that's a lot of times that's good enough. They're also remarkably flexible. So if you're going to have 2 or 3 people, it's a good idea to know who's going to be in charge of what. You can spell this out. When you create your LLC, you can, in your articles of organization, you can spell out who has the rights to do what things. It's also a really good idea if you've got 2 or 3 people involved or more, that you have a way to either buy out partners or a way to kick out these other members of your LLC. I mean, LLCs, businesses, they're kind of like marriages. They all start out sunshine and roses, and then sometimes they go south. You might want to have a way to deal with that problem later on. That's one of the reasons why I recommend you work with an attorney. They can help set this stuff up on the front end, and they can help you foresee some of those potential problems down the road. All right, that is the quick and dirty on business entities. Any questions on business entities?
Hey, sir. Thank you very much. I actually have a question, if you don't mind.
Yep, go right ahead.
So, for a business in the sense where you would have, say, for instance, a trucking business where you have assets that are directly related to that business, like the trucks, how would you separate something along the lines of property? So, say, for instance, you have an acre of land that you're using for your urban farming, and you're using that for your urban farming, but it's actually your land as well. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you separate that?
There's a lot of different ways you can do it. So you can, if you've got a trucking business and then you got land that's owned by the trucking business that you're wanting to use for an urban farming operation, you could set up another LLC, and that LLC could rent that acreage that they're going to use for farming from the business that owns the trucking operation. You just got to pay it fair market rate, whatever's the going rate for ag land in the area. make it look like it's an arm's length transaction so that it's separate. You know, you're keeping that separation, and you can do that no problem. If you want to use your trucks to haul produce, you can do the same thing. Just hire them out. Make sure that you've got a check that goes from the farm to the farming operation over to the trucking operation, and you cash the check. And you can do that. You can keep it separate, and a lawyer can help you arrange that so that everything's kosher.
So what about in the case where you are doing the farming, say for instance, from your home? How do you separate your home, your property at home from your business entity that you're actually running from the house?
So you're actually farming, like farming your yard, or you got a little bit of an acreage, or?
Right, you're farming your yard, say your rooftop, something like that.
That's a little bit trickier. What you can do is you can still do a rental for the space. And like I said, you really want to have a lawyer help you with this. You
Okay.
can rent that square footage that you're using, like a rooftop garden. It's not that uncommon for people to want to do an office, like a home office that you would rent and then try to deduct that as well from your taxes. That's the kind of things that make the IRS a little bit suspicious. So having that attorney help you set it up, or having a CPA kind of help you set it up to avoid those issues, I highly recommend it.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Could I add on to that?
Mhm.
I was just gonna say, if you do have acreage, like, say you have like 30 acres, your house is on there, but you're only farming 10 of your acres, how would you separate those?
You just rent out that acreage. So you could rent it from yourself personally over to your LLC. So if I Rusty Rumley owned 30 acres and I created, Rumley Farms, I would have Rumley Farms rent the 10 acres where I'm going to be growing the produce. And then just kind of give a basic legal description. It's the 10 acres that's over on the south side, or the southeast quarter, southeast 10 acres. Just some kind of basic to kind of give a description of what 10 acres are being rented. And then I'd need to make sure that Rumley Farms writes a check to Rusty Rumley for whatever the fair market value is, and you cash it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, my name is, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So if you have an LLC and you are a one-person LLC, can you still hire employees?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I will move on into zoning. This is easily one of those top 10 topics. I mean, we get lots of calls and emails over the year at the center here about zoning issues. It's also something that I can be of almost no help on whatsoever. Zoning is one of those things, it's done at the local level. This is something that, especially for urban agriculture, you guys are going to have to deal with. Sometimes, straight up just growing produce, you may not have too much of an issue, but it's when you start having to have things like storage sheds to put equipment in, or if you're going to do some type of agritourism, like you're going to do you pick berries or something like that. When you start having lots of people on there, or if you need to build a restroom or that kind of stuff, you're going to run into zoning issues pretty quickly. Zoning boards are insular, they're parochial, sometimes they're just a pain to deal with. Some of them follow the rules that are written down. Others, I mean, I've talked to people where it's, they're right. Like, I mean, they've got the city ordinances are on their side, but the zoning board, they've done it this way for the last 25 years and they don't care what's written down. If you don't like it, sue them. You'll eventually beat them. You'll pay $5,000 to $10,000 of attorney's fees, and then they're going to nickel and dime you on every other issue you ever have to take in front of them. The best thing I can do is give you some tips. Like I said, this is done at the local level. So you're going to need to work with someone closely from the city. Whenever you have conversations with them, get it in writing if you can. If you have a verbal conversation with someone from the city, follow up with an email. Hey, Tim Scott, it was wonderful talking with you today. I asked you this question on whether or not I needed a permit to do a composting facility on my property. You told me that no, there's no permits needed. There's no zoning variance needed to do a composting facility. I really appreciate your time. If there's anything that's wrong or if there's anything in error, please let me know. And then you shoot that email over to Tim Scott. And if he never responds, guess what? That's the written record of what your communications were. You don't want to get into the he said, she said with a government official. Courts and juries tend to believe the government official over other people. So make sure you get things in writing. The other thing is a lot of times there'll be multiple inspectors or multiple zoning people, and you'll deal with different people. So having that written record's really important going forward. I cannot stress this enough. Do not get into any arguments with zoning boards or city employees. I had one call, is pre-COVID now. Guy called, he's wanting to do a wedding barn. And he built the barn, like everything's ready to go. He said, I think I need an attorney. I said, okay, well, what happened? He went into a zoning board meeting. He got into a fight with the zoning board people, and they called a police officer to escort him from the premises. At this point, he is out of luck. Like, he's never going to get a permit. Like, once they call the cops to remove you from the premises, you're done. I mean, if you're wanting to do something in that town, tough luck. You might as well just sell and move to a different location. So you can't ever let it get to that point. If you think that you're getting any pushback whatsoever, go find an attorney. You don't need a fancy attorney. Sometimes you need a specialist. Sometimes you might need someone that's an ag lawyer. This is not one of those times. You don't want the person that got A's in their law school class. You want the person that's dating the daughter of someone that's on the zoning board. I mean, this right here is the quintessential example of it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like, get that local attorney that knows the people on the zoning board and deals with those issues all the time. That's the person you want. Doesn't matter if they have the nicest office. They're probably going to be one of the cheapest people out there. Wonderful. It's a win-win. But ask around, find out who does these kinds of disputes in your area. That's the person you want. You don't want to get a high-priced lawyer out of New York City or Washington, D.C. You want to go with the local person that people on the zoning board knows. That's the person that's probably going to be able to resolve your issue the cheapest and simplest. Also, be prepared to be flexible. You may not get everything you want when you're dealing with the zoning board. They may not let you have the massive parking lot that you want, or they may not let you put in 6 bathrooms for an agritourism operation. You may have to do something different. You may have to bring in porta potties if you're going to have a festival, or there may be other things. They may not give you a permanent zoning exemption, but they may be willing to give you 4 or 5 special use permits that you can use throughout the year. Be flexible. And like I said, if you think you're getting any pushback, reach out to that local attorney as quickly as you can. Any questions on zoning? Like I said, the main thing is never, ever, ever get into an argument with them. Keep things friendly, keep things in writing. And if you get pushback, make sure you go to a local attorney that knows the people involved. All right, so the last category that I want to talk about is landowner liability. So when I talk about landowner liability, I'm talking about what happens if someone comes onto your farm and they get hurt. and they sue. Who can sue? What are their odds of winning? What can you do to limit that risk? So generally speaking, people that are just getting started in farming, you end up going with smaller acreages and higher valued crops. I cannot tell you the number of people that I've talked to in the past that, well, I've got 5 acres or I've got 10 acres and I'm going to do blueberries or strawberries or blackberries. And, no one's going to be on my land. I'm going to take care of picking my own berries and I'm going to sell them at the farmer's market. That's great. You're not going to pick 8 or 9 acres of berries yourself every single year. I can promise you, you're going to try to figure something else out. You're going to hire employees, which are getting really hard to do, or what's more common is people open up you-pick operations. Most people do not do you-pick operations because they love people or they're trying to educate people about where their food comes from. Most people that get into you-pick operations that I know of were basically forced to get into it because they literally couldn't find anybody to pick the berries. And if you can get the customers to go out there and pick their own berries, that's a win-win. You sell the berries and you don't have to pay for labor. So a lot of the people that I know of that have gotten into the you-pick game, they really weren't intending to ever have people on their land. They don't think of themselves as agritourism, but they kind of got backed into it because of labor shortages. People are very interested in where their food comes from, and they're very interested in learning how to grow their own food. Getting customers to come out there and pick produce is probably not as hard as you guys think it is. So this ends up being a pretty common solution to a lot of labor issues, and it's not without its risks. I mean, you run into this concept of premises liability. What happens if someone ends up getting hurt on your land? Like I said, I usually tell classes, I grew up on a farm. I grew up in a ranch in Western Oklahoma. We never worried about premises liability because there was literally no one else out there around where I grew up that could have got on our land and gotten hurt. I mean, there was cattle and there was coyotes, and there really just wasn't a whole lot of other things out there. So, but if you're doing urban farming and you're surrounded by people, there's going to be people that are curious and they're going to want to come onto your land. So how you deal with that can affect your potential legal liability. The gist of this slide right here is that when it comes to liability, when someone comes on your land, your level of responsibility is based off of your duty of care or your duty to those entrants onto your land. Different people are entitled to to higher and lower levels of protection. And you can make this work in your favor as a landowner if you're smart about it. So not all land entrants are treated the same. So the law basically divvies up entrants onto land into 3 categories. A person is either a trespasser, a licensee, or an invitee. Sometimes that last one will be called the business invitee, depending upon the state. And your duty of care as a landowner, or it could be as a tenant if you're renting land, but you have control over the land, your duty of care is going to depend upon which one of these 3 categories the people get put into. As you can imagine, your responsibility to a trespasser is going to be a heck of a lot lower than what you're going to owe to a licensee or to a business invitee. So I don't need to define trespasser. I think everyone knows what a trespasser is. A licensee is someone who's on the premises with permission, but does not bestow a benefit on the landowner. Well, that's kind of a weird definition. So who would we be talking about there? Anyone got any guesses? They're there with permission, but bestowed no benefit to the landowner or occupier.
People that have permission to hunt the property.
Yep, that'd be a common one right there. Someone comes up, says, hey, can I go hunting on your property? And you say, sure. That would be a licensee. Also, people that fall in this, friends and family that come over. I mean, if you do a Super Bowl watch party at your house, you're not getting any financial benefit from that. You're just having friends and family come over to watch the game. So that'd be another common example of a licensee. The last one is a business invitee. So this is someone that's there for some kind of business purpose. So definitely customers, your employees are going to fall under this as well. So this is a pretty broad category. You've also got to be a little bit careful for things like, especially when you get into the agritourism. I'll talk to farmers that they'll invite out a local kindergarten class and say, well, we don't charge the kindergarten class. So they're not business invitees. They kind of are business invitees. The kids themselves aren't paying, but the whole reason you invite those kids out is because you want them to have a good time, and then you want them to go home to mommy and daddy and say, what a great time they had. Let's go back out over the weekend and let's spend a lot of money there. So it's kind of like a more of an advertising type situation. So depending on the situation, you can get into scenarios where there may not be an immediate economic benefit for the person being on the land, but maybe you're expecting a future economic benefit, such as, you know, advertising or something like that. So let's look at the duty of care. So your duty of care to a trespasser is pretty low. Basically, you have to refrain from willfully or wantonly injuring the trespasser. So, i.e., don't set booby traps. There is a difference between adult trespassers and child trespassers in most states. Not all of them, though, and we'll talk about that. But don't engage in willful or wanton misconduct. Here's the definition of it, the first bullet point. I mean, the big thing is, like I said, you can't go out there, you can't physically assault a trespasser, you can't shoot a trespasser, you can't set booby traps that attempt to capture, maim, or kill trespassers. If you don't do that, that pretty much sums up your liability that you owe to trespassers. I mean, this is a pretty low burden. The group, though, that is the most notorious about setting booby traps are farmers. You can't imagine how many of these presentations I've done around the country where I say, don't set booby traps. And then some farmer raises their hand and want to tell me the cool booby trap that they devised to get people that are stealing watermelons or stealing anhydrous ammonia. You know, well, I set up a punji trap like I learned how to do in Vietnam. It's like, well, that's great. You know, it killed a lot of American soldiers over here and over there. And if you kill someone here, you're going to go to prison for it and you're going to get sued. So, you know, you got to be really careful about doing things that are set up to injure trespassers. Here's an example. I took this one off of Craigslist here a couple of years ago in Arkansas. So this is an example of someone setting or trying to set a booby trap. So there's nothing wrong with owning a bull. There's nothing wrong with owning an aggressive bull. But the purpose of a bull is to breed cattle. And in this case right here, you can see this person doesn't care about breeding cattle. He just wants one that'll chase people off. So in this case right here, this is a great example of someone that, you know, there's nothing wrong with owning a bull, but if the sole purpose of owning the bull is to chase people off, that's a problem. This works the exact same way with a dog. There's nothing wrong with having a pet dog. There's nothing wrong with having a dog, you know, as a companion. But if you have the stereotypical junkyard dog whose only purpose is to attack anyone that sets foot inside the fence, that's a booby trap. And if they do bite someone, you're going to be held liable for it. Because usually they don't end up biting the bad guy. They usually end up taking a bite out of the neighborhood kids. So child trespassers are a little bit different. So most states, not all of them, Maryland is one big glaring example of where this does not apply. But most states say that if you have something on your land that is basically so cool that you're luring small children onto your land and then they get injured, you're at fault. The problem with agriculture is we have a lot of really cool things that little kids love to play on, whether it's old farm equipment or barns or chemical storage sheds. There's just a lot of cool stuff kids like to play with. And unfortunately, agriculture can be pretty dangerous. Like I said, most of these states, they don't even give you a good definition of who is subject to this attractive nuisance doctrine. In Arkansas, we say children of tender years. What age is a tender year? I have no idea on. Maryland just flat out doesn't recognize attractive nuisance. Virginia, I think anyone under age 7 definitely applies to. Over age 7, it starts getting into a little bit more of a gray area. Some states, if you're under 17, attractive nuisance applies. This is a pretty vague area. There's not a lot you can do from a legal perspective on this. The only thing you can do is take common sense steps. If you end up, if you have a tractor or something like that, don't park it near the property line. Lock up your tools and stuff like that at night. Don't leave them laying out there for the neighborhood kids to pick up and swing at each other when you're not there. Other than taking some common sense steps like that, there's not really a great way to protect yourself from liability with children. Any questions on that attractive nuisance doctrine stuff? Usually someone asks me, well, it's the parent's fault. And unfortunately, the way the law works is if the kid's hurt, the lawsuit is to recoup the losses for the kid. And the legal system, the basic rule is we don't fault the kid for having a bad parent. So even though the parent's going to end up being the one in charge of the money and they're probably going to spend it on something dumb, but we're still technically awarding the money to the kid. So that is for trespassers. For licensees, like I said, these are the people, they're on there with permission, but they're not there for a business purpose. Your duty as the landowner / occupier is you have to warn them of any hidden dangers that they might not be able to see before it's too late. So for example, you know that you've got a lot of bees out there in your the land that you're farming this year. Sometimes people are allergic to bees. If you've got a high number of bees out there, it's a good idea to remind people before they walk out there, hey, there's a lot of bees out there this year. If you're allergic to bees, you might want to stay away. Snakes, you got a lot of poisonous snakes this year. Warn people, hey, there's a lot of snakes out there this year. Watch out where you're stepping. It has to be hidden. So you're not expected to warn people of everything. So if you've got a giant pond on your land, you're not expected to warn people, now there's a pond over there, you could fall and trip in it and drown. A pond's big enough someone should be able to see it before they fall into it. We're only talking about hidden dangers. Invitees. So these are people, they are there for a business purpose. Like I said, this is a pretty broad category of people that can fall in on this particular category. You've got a duty to make the premises reasonably safe and to warn them of any existing dangers that you can't fix. This duty of care works really well if you own a grocery store. If someone spills milk in the dairy aisle, send an employee to clean it up before someone falls. If a light bulb is burned out in the produce section, send an employee to replace the light bulb before someone trips over something and hurts themselves. How do you make farmland safe? The answer is there's not really a great way, especially if you've got anything bigger than just a tiny, tiny piece of land. Can you be expected to fill in every single pothole? Can you be expected to kill every single poisonous spider, snake, anything like that? No. It's impossible. So for people that are inviting other people on your land, I always say it's really important to define the area where they can be. You can use this to your advantage. So this status of the entrant can change fluidly. So here I give an example here of how you can change it. So someone comes up, they knock on your door, they want to go fishing in your pond. You say, sure, go right ahead. At that point, they're a licensee. They got permission to go out to the pond and fish. You're not charging them any money. While they're out there, they decide to explore the rest of your land. Maybe they want to go hunting later on, and you catch them. Well, you gave them permission to be at the pond, but you didn't give them permission to go trapezing all around your land. So at that point, they're a trespasser because they have exceeded your authority of where you're allowing them to go. After you catch them, though, they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. How about I give you $50 for your trouble? If you accept that $50, they've just gone from being a trespasser over to a business invitee, because now you've got a financial stake of them being on your land. But you can use this to your advantage. A lot of times you don't want people going all over the land that you're going to farm. You don't want people going near your equipment. You don't want people going near the chemical storage shed. If you've got a food prep or vegetable prep area, you don't want people going out there and putting their dirty hands on things. Keep them out of those areas. Restrict them to a fairly small space, and it's much easier to police those areas and make sure that they're safe for people to be at. And I'm going to skip agritourism statutes. If you are doing agritourism, I highly recommend looking at your state agritourism statutes. We have them on our website. They are a wonderful tool for risk prevention. Very, very useful.
Rusty, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay. I guess I do want to cover insurance, though. So for insurance, I do recommend insurance, especially if you're going to be having a lot of people come onto your property. There are different types of insurance. The one that most people are familiar with is like general homeowners policy. There's also a general farm policy that you can purchase. If you are having lots of people come onto your land and it looks like you're doing something more akin to agritourism or you pick or something like that, most general farm policies will not work. They will not provide adequate protection. So you need to talk to your insurance agent and see, hey, I'm doing these things. I'm doing these 5 things. Is the insurance policy that I currently have, is that going to cover if, a tragedy happens? Who should have their name on the policy? So let's just say you've created your LLC. You can have the LLC purchase the insurance policy. I usually recommend that you name yourself and any other people involved in it as an additional insured. You want to make sure that the insurance policy covers everybody, so that if something does happen, they're not picking off a family member of yours to sue individually. And then realize insurance isn't perfect. I was talking to a broker, insurance broker, and he had this particular case come up. It was his company, they sold hunting insurance, and they had a gentleman that had leased the land. He was out there hunting. There was a buck up on the ridge. He shot at the buck. He missed the buck. The bullet traveled over a mile away and it hit a pregnant woman in her driveway, and it killed her and the unborn baby. Insurance says, no, we're not covering this. The reason for that is the insurance policy covered all injuries that occurred on the land. The hunter pulled the trigger on the land, but the lady was killed in her driveway a mile away. So insurance it's a great tool. It's not perfect though. So I highly recommend looking at other risk mitigation strategies, such as agritourism statutes, business entities, defining where people can go and can't go. When you talk to your insurance agent and you ask if you're covered, make sure you do it in writing. Even if you have a verbal conversation with that person on the phone, just like you do with the city zoning person, you follow up in an email. Hey, dear insurance agent, it was great talking with you today. I asked you if these 5 things, and you spell them out in detail, would be covered by my insurance policy, and you assured me that my current policy covers it. Thank you very much. If there's anything in error, please let me know. The reason why you want to do that is even if your insurance company later on says, well, no, he's wrong, this isn't covered, your insurance agent has something called errors and omissions policy, and you can actually sue them and recover against their insurance policy. So there's still ways to protect yourself, even if the insurance agent's wrong. You just got to get it in writing. All right, I've sped through all that stuff. Are there any questions that you guys have in a very, very short questions? All right, well, thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your training.
All right, thank you so much, Rusty. And hopefully you all just saw his contact information, but if you missed it or want to go back for it, just keep in mind that it is in the Teachable folder for all the presenters. Their contact information is listed, so you can find Rusty there if you need to get in touch with them. And Rusty, thanks so much for the legal information.
Yep. Like I said, I can't give legal advice, so don't ask for legal advice.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
All right, so at this time, I am happy to introduce my friend and colleague, Tammy Howard. Tammy works with NCAT out of our Montana office and is heavily involved with a lot of our arm to farm trainings on the West Coast in Great Plains area. And she's now going to share with us information regarding marketing and branding. And Tammy is also a farmer, and I want to welcome you, Tammy.
Thanks. Great to be here. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And I'll start my slideshow. All right. Well, thank you, Rusty, for kicking us off with the legal speak in such a wonderful and approachable way. That was great. So we're gonna, as Andy said, we're gonna switch into farm marketing and promotion, and we have a lot to cover. I usually cover this topic in like a 3 to 5 hours or 3 different hour-long sessions. So I'm just gonna dig into it, but I might be just blowing through a lot of the topics and content. And so I just want to make sure that you all feel comfortable and know that you can reach out to me. Here's my email. I'm also going to be at next week's office hours. So you can feel free to take any marketing questions that you might have or marketing pitch or whatever. And I'll be there for that. But as Andy mentioned, my name is Tammy, and I am a horticulture specialist with NCAT. I also coordinate the Montana Northwest Arm to Farm program. And I am a flower farmer. I have like a little micro flower farm here in Belgrade, Montana.
Hey, Tammy, just so you know, we're seeing your presenter mode.
Oh, are you really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me try to, thank you for letting me know that. I let me try this again here. There we go. How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, good. You want to see all my rambling notes and everything. So, okay, great. So, what we're going to talk about tonight. So we want you to identify who that ideal customer is, how to distribute to that ideal customer through different marketing channels, And then how to set yourself apart within those marketing channels, like what makes you unique. And then finally, thinking about how to combine all of those concepts into a marketing plan for your business plan. What I want you to take away from this is I want you folks to understand those basic marketing concepts and distribution channels, and then consider which of those channels work well with your farm and your lifestyle goals, and then identify some of those challenges and resources that are needed to enter into those markets. And then, I encourage you to write a lot of this stuff down, because, some of those components that we're going to be talking about will be the beginning of that marketing plan for your business. And a lot of the, in Teachable, we have some of those resources to help guide you through that, through some of these questions and concepts as well. So, so why marketing? This isn't new to you, I'm sure, but marketing is that critical part of your farm business, and you can grow the most amazing product like you see here, Edible Earthscapes, amazing tomatoes or strawberries here in the bottom left corner. But if you haven't spent time figuring out where and how to sell that product, you're not going to be in business for very long. So it's important to think about how you're going to sell those amazing products that you're producing, and make a plan before you even put a single seed in the ground, or before you even buy a single animal if you're producing livestock products. So this class really focuses on trying to capture a higher return for your product. So if you're, for example, if you're a beef farm, our business planning approach always encourages you to look for ways that prevent you from being like a price taker, and more thinking about how to be a price maker. So a really great example that I like to share is from a farmer here in Montana. He's an organic grain farmer, and he tells a story about this product called kamut. It's an ancient grain, and he used to sell it by the bushel. And then they found a way to start selling that product by the pound, by processing it into into flour instead of just the raw wheat. And then finally, they're at this point selling that product by the ounce, because they're processing that into a product called crackling kamut. And so, going from selling by the bushel to the ounce has created an amazing return for their product. So we want you to think about it in terms of that way. So, after I think that at this point in the training, you've already given some thought about what type of enterprise you're going to be producing. So that next step is determining who is going to buy that product. So think about who they are, where you're going to find them, and what do they value. So it might seem excessive to narrow it down so much, but we don't want to market to everyone, right? So I'm sure you've all heard that if you're marketing to everyone, you're going to be marketing really to no one. Except there's a few exceptions there. I'd say like Amazon is one of those exceptions, and Walmart. But we really want to narrow down who our customer is. So here's an example. A lot of farms that we work with are marketing to this demographic, the LOHAs. Ironically, this is me and my friend Amy skiing, but I would consider myself a LOHA as well, LOHAs as well. And that stands for Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. So, these folks care about their health. They're, they like to, they're very active. They really care who they're buying their food from and the type of food that they're putting into their bodies. So So how are you going to find those LOHAs if that's who you decide is going to be your, your ideal customer? So demographic information is a really great place to start in finding that. So you can find demographic information about the population of the area that you're interested in marketing to. So a lot of you folks are in urban areas and you're, along the mid-Atlantic area, and you can look up that census data from the fact finder tool. You can see the web address right here, or you can just Google this census fact finder, and then you'll be able to narrow down like gender, age, income for that area that you're living in. So that's a really great place to start. And then once you've identified that ideal customer, you want to ask yourself, so what are their wants and needs? Or in other words, how is your product going to turn their pains into a gain? And so how do you find what your customers' pains are? So one way to do that is observing your customers. Look at, think about what your product is and observe customers buying a similar product in different marketing channels. So let's use an example of goat cheese. So if you go to the farmer's market and see how customers are interacting with the producer that's selling goat cheese, and are they just like twiddling their thumbs or is there a line for their product? And how do those customers react to it in the grocery stores, and what's missing in those markets? So think about that too, and how your product can fill that niche. Another way is like, just ask your friends, ask people that you feel comfortable with. Do your customers want, like going back to the goat cheese example, a spreadable product for their farm to table supper? Do they want consistent delivery every week? Do they need a very super hyper fresh product? Those are the types of things that you want to find out so that you can make sure that your product is meeting their needs. So here's an example from our farm. The name of our farm is called Nana Louie Farm, and my son named a chicken named our farm after a chicken that is long gone. And initially we lived in pretty much a working class neighborhood outside of Bozeman, Montana. And my intuition said when we were starting this farm that we're probably not going to be providing these bouquets to the neighbor down the street who's working construction and is never home. I needed someone that really appreciated the service that I provided, this pre-made bouquet that I provide on a weekly basis, and the experience of beautiful, unique, and locally grown blooms. So, to be honest, 90% of my customers are women. And then the other 10% are buying them for their wife for like Mother's Day, or their mothers for Mother's Day, or mother-in-laws. So, but an interesting thing has happened. I don't know if any of you have heard, but we have a bunch of people moving to Bozeman, and we have had a bunch of development here. So our neighborhood demographic has actually changed a little bit, and that has prompted me to do some U-pick flowers and start a little flower farm stand and pop-up markets. That business, actually that side of my business is really starting to pick up, and I found Rusty's talk very useful for that. So here's an example of one of the worksheets that Carlos uploaded onto Teachable. Thank you, Carlos. And as you can see here, this is my my customer demographic worksheet. And so for me, I want a customer that's within an hour of the farm, because I have an off-farm job and I don't want to spend too much time driving. And what what's important to them is they want, and they have an aesthetic for unique flowers. They're interested in the slow flower or local flower movement. And that's important to my ideal customer. They're, like I mentioned, predominantly female professionals in their late 20s, all the way into their 70s. And then their pains are that the store-bought flowers don't really last too long. They're boring. And my bouquets are pre-made with unique flowers that last a full week. So thinking about that type of situation and, do that for your homework over the next week. So now that you've identified that ideal customer, how are you going to sell to them? So we're going to shift into that distribution channels. But I want to first, before we shift, any questions about demographics or any of the stuff I was talking about identifying your ideal customer?
Sure. I have a question for demographics. Like, did you have an established business prior to identifying what your demographics were, or did you have an idea of what you were going to shoot for before you developed your business?
Great question, Charles. No, ideally, you're identifying that customer once you know what the product is that you're producing. And so for me, that has shifted over the years. My husband and I actually had a community supported agriculture vegetable farm. And at that point, our customer was a little different. But so as my my enterprises have shifted, so has my ideal customer. And so I filled that out when I was shifting that enterprise. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes it difficult for a new business person like myself trying to figure out when I build my business up, if we're trying to do these models in accordance with the arm the farm mindset right here, it makes it difficult to actually identify. If I just spent 24 or 28 years in the United States military, I really don't know who else likes the same things I do because I'm not a normal demographic myself. So yeah, I wanted to know if that was something you had already had. That's all.
So I think the next section will help put all of that stuff into focus, because yeah, you do want to identify that ideal customer, but also it's really important to understand how your goals and your lifestyle goals and all of those things fit into the puzzle of marketing. So so hopefully this will help, and if not, we can talk later on, Charles. So yes, so we're going to dig into how marketing channels, these two different marketing channels that are on your screen, the direct marketing channels and intermediate channels. And I have another hand up. I don't know who this is. Odom.
Oh, sorry. My name is Cassandra Odoms.
Oh, hi, Cassandra.
Hi. Can you please explain what, I'm going to see if I can remember what you said, a community supported agricultural business is?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that is a form of direct marketing. And it's kind of like a subscription service for folks that want to basically have more of a stake in the farm. I think of it as a kind of sophisticated marketing strategy where basically you're producing a specific set of products. The customer is investing in your farm ahead of time, and then you're giving them a weekly supply of that product. So I have a subscription service for my flowers, and I would think of that as kind of a community supported agriculture flower, but most of them are focused on vegetables, and they do produce like a weekly supply of vegetables, and the customer invests in the risks. So for example, if the farmer has a specific crop failure like the weevils in the carrots, then that farmer is sharing, the customer is sharing the risk with the farm, and but so Andy, do you want to say anything else about CSAs?
No, maybe I'll save it for next week's presentation when I sort of align it to how we operate ours on our farm.
Okay.
in terms of the
Yeah, so
benefits.
Andy will be talking more about CSAs next week. It's a great direct, sorry about my dogs barking. It's a great direct marketing channel though, but you have to have experience because there is some risk for your customers getting a diverse supply of vegetables every week.
I
And
guess
this,
I would say though that it all goes back to what we talked about the last 2 weeks in understanding cash flow. So I'll sort of tie all that together by next week. But and just so you know, Tammy, there's a couple other hands raised.
okay, I see Miss Mel.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Even piggybacking a little on the CSA at the farm that I work at, I do some of my value added products there, but they have a summer CSA and a fall CSA. And I do know that some farms, like they'll purchase stuff from other farms to add on to their CSAs, or they'll have particular value added products. And value added products are like perks you get like with CSAs or whatever, or like extra products, like they'll have like cakes or something, for instance, at farm stand, which are value added products is what we call them. But as far as marketing, I think somebody was asking, how do you know your market? But sometimes you can like do online searches and see what the demographics are in your areas, to just see like maybe median incomes, what people are spending on, and who they're spending on. I know in one business section I did, that's how we're doing. Or you could even create a survey. There are different ways you can create a survey that'll pretty much and just send it out to people or just stuff like that too. And that'll kind of give you your demographic as well, or just people maybe that are farming, and just kind of go around and just ask them if they'd be willing to share information as far as what their demographic is and how do you know who to sell to, just as a suggestion. Because I know at the farm, sometimes I work at, they were like, at one point they didn't change their price of their CSA for a certain amount of time. But now things are on a sliding scale, which kind of works kind of for the area, and then it turns out people are willing to pay more because they know it's supporting the farmers and it's supporting the farmers' pay, for instance. So you just never know.
That's great. Thanks for reiterating some of those concepts, Miss Mel. I appreciate that. And then that is a really great point. So I feel like community supported agriculture has kind of grown into a very huge movement, and there's so many different ways of approaching that particular marketing model. And we have I saw that Margot or somebody put the CSA marketing tip sheet into the chat, and that is also on your Teachable. So any other questions before I shift into channels? Cool. Okay, so we break channels into like direct marketing channels, which you can see here are we really talked a lot about community supported agriculture channels. as well as intermediate channels, which are kind of like one step removed from you as the farmer. So grocery stores, restaurants, institutions, and food hubs. One thing that we're not going to be talking about today, though, is wholesale distribution channels, because they don't typically allow for you to maintain your brand identity and get a higher return on your product. So we don't really focus on that as much as on direct and intermediate marketing channels. So let's dig a little bit more into those here in the next few slides. So as you start thinking, though, about your distribution channel, consider the goals that you all have given some thought to over the last few weeks, and especially in that first session on whole farm planning that Andy was talking about. Your marketing and your goals should be really closely aligned, because the marketing distribution methods can have profound implications or impacts on your lifestyle and your lifestyle goals. So those are important things to think about among these other considerations when you're thinking about the type of marketing channel that you want to sell through. This graph really isn't news, but I feel like it's a really great portrayal of the difference between wholesale and direct marketing channels. Most of you are doing, I'm assuming, doing the urban farming are probably going to be on less than 5 acres, right? So you're probably going to mostly be involved in doing or selling through like a direct marketing channel. But it's harder for a larger, like 50 to 100 acre farm to be really successful in direct marketing channels, because there typically needs to be a lot of diversity and a lot of one-on-one customer interaction. So that's just what this is portraying. So each marketing channel that is going to require a specific set of skills and resources. And there are some resources listed here on your screen for direct marketing channels for you to think about. So identifying what those skills and resources are needed for each channel before engaging in that distribution is a really important step to being successful at it. So, thinking about in-person versus, more impersonal direct marketing channels and the tools and resources needed for that. So let's talk about some of those. So do you think that this shop owner should be engaged in direct marketing? I would say no, certainly not. A personality that engages customers in a friendly manner is pretty much a must for in-person direct marketing channels. Retail experience is also a plus. And I will also say that, online sales is a direct marketing channel, but it requires a different set of skills and resources, right? So you need to have some kind of coding experience or web design experience if you're going to be engaged in online sales and understand that. Or you can hire somebody for that. So I want some of you to talk, unmute yourself. What do you think are some skills and resources that are needed for direct marketing? Yes, Mel?
Maybe I guess community outreach. You got to get out there and well, for me, city farming, you got to get out there in community, see who folks are, see what they want. That's one thing. You got to be able to talk to people. That's very important that I found. Engage with your customer.
Great. Yeah, definitely a lot of that community outreach and communication to set yourself apart.
I saw, Charles Wagenwerner. Hey, I saw some guys at our local farmers market just recently, and I've seen this before, but now I'm trying to connect it to what you're talking about, direct marketing. So people were buying, they were trending on certain things, and he wanted to direct that to a better crop that he was actually, or a crop that he was producing more of. So what I found very interesting is you would go there and you'd buy your generic apples or whatever, but he would actually give you recipes with, he'd say, hey, here's this, or a free sample of a salsa, and say, well, I made that with these ingredients. So when people came by, he had this stuff available and a completed product, but he was giving you the taste of it. He gave you the recipe to make it. He showed you, all right, here's a salsa box, take this, and this will, to be the starter box, add your seasonings. That triggered me to buy stuff I didn't even want in the first place because he had something new. So that was,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just setting that, yeah, making sure that people understand what's in your product and all of that stuff. And we'll hopefully get to the opportunity to do that in setting yourself apart and telling your story here in a little bit. Another thing to think about, Rusty was talking about liability insurance. If you have a farm stand or engaged in agritourism, thinking about, parking, location, and all of those kinds of things. So that's another really important thing. So let's talk a little bit about intermediate markets, which can be good for folks that really have no interest in engaging in direct markets, but still want to retain some consumer food dollar and brand identity. Intermediate markets are typically part of a value chain, what we call a value chain, or in other words, they are doing like a values-based distribution model. They value more return for their farmers that they're working for and more money circulating in the local food economy. So they're a really great place for new farmers to get engaged in marketing. And they also take some of the pressure off of farmers, but help them maintain that brand identity that I was talking about. And this sounds pretty great, but what are some of the considerations with intermediate markets? Well, one thing that you do want to consider if you're thinking about intermediate markets is consistency. So consistent communication, and consistent supply, and some will require some kind of certification, like organic certification, or if you're produce farmers, GAP certification. So those are really important considerations and can add to that, those important cash flow things that Seth was talking about last week. So how do you find these distribution channels? And if your state has one of the things I definitely encourage you to do is look at local food listings for your state. So I did a quick search and found that the Maryland area has a buy local challenge, and their webpage, and they also, it's operated by the Department of Agriculture and Markets. And as you can see here, there's this is broken down by county, but you can click on any one of these and it will take you to businesses that, including restaurants and retail operations that make local food purchasing a priority. So you can go to there and try to find some of those markets and then, approach them with your amazing product. So to summarize, there's about 13, what we consider 13 common ways for farmers to sell, or channels for farmers to sell their products through. And I've only highlighted about half of those. And if you're interested in finding out more about specific market channels, please check out the ATRA marketing channel tip sheets, which are also in Teachable. And they'll help you learn about way more details of each of these channels. And let me just show you some of the features of these marketing tip sheets so you know what you're looking at. They're designed to help you think about each market channel individually and how well it might fit with your farm. So each tip sheet has a really similar format up, you can see up here in the right corner, there's a picture with the carrots and the dollar signs, and that indicates the quantity that you might expect to sell through this market. So for example, 1 carrot means you'll sell smaller quantities, and then 3 or more carrots is, you know, a larger quantity, like no duh. Okay, so the dollar signs indicate the level of prices you can expect for that product. So the other thing I wanted to point out, or, you know, there's, it talks about advantages, considerations, and tips for getting into that particular market channel. And I know that Margot shared this particular marketing tip sheet, so you can all look at it while I'm talking about it. And then finally, key questions to ask yourself before getting into that marketing channel. And then in true ATRA form, we have lots of publications and resources for you to follow up on within each of the tip sheets. So definitely encourage you all to check it out as you start narrowing down the way you're going to distribute your product. So I'm going to shift here to talking about competition and how you're going to set yourself apart from the folks selling the same product within that marketing channel. How will your customers know what you're good at? And we encourage farmers to look at these areas that are on your screen and think about what you can be best at. What are you best at? Just be best at one of these areas, and then try to be very good at another. And then you can be on par. You don't want to be terrible on one of these things. Like if you have terrible service, nobody's going to want to buy your product, right? But you want to be on par with the other 3. And then finally, how are your customers going to know that you're the best you have the best lamb chops in the county? You know, how are they going to know that? So let's talk about price. What do you think about when you're thinking about low prices? Do you think about this? Walmart? Who's going to compete with Walmart, right? So when we're talking about price, we don't really consider price to be a niche. You know, while most customers will value a low price, it's not something that comes from your community. And price also it can be kind of dangerous to compete on price and price alone, because you really need to understand how much it costs for you to produce your products. And so we really encourage beginning farmers to think about other ways to set yourself apart. And, you know, do you know, for example, if you're producing broccoli, do you know how much it costs to produce that 1 head of broccoli? If it costs you $2 to grow it and you're selling it at the cheapest at the farmer's market for $1, then you're losing money by selling that. So you have to be really good at record keeping in order to compete through price. So definitely encourage folks to think about other ways to set yourself apart. So here's some other ways. Access, you know, is your product easily accessible? You know, my pitch is to do like you know, for example, a farm stand is more accessible. And, you know, it also includes that amazing experience. So like you can have a couple of these things that is setting you apart. And then Charlie was talking about those recipes, right? That's another really great way. That's a service that people are setting. That farm is providing a service to their customer. So thinking about that way to access, service, and experience as a way to set yourself apart. And so the next topic I want to talk about is like, so how are you how are you setting yourself apart and what makes your product unique? And we talked about that uniqueness in a way that that helps your customer find you in the marketing channel. But now let's talk about how you can use it to make yourself well known. So sources of uniqueness are like, assets that you have on the farm. One of the things that all of you folks have are, your military affiliation. All of you should be hopefully involved or or right after this workshop will, sign up to be a Farmer Veteran Coalition and be part of the Homegrown by Heroes network and then get part of the label. And but it could also be that, land or location or structures or facilities that you have on your farm. And then finally, skills. I love doing doing bouquet arranging and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a skill that I bring, that I put into my marketing message. And then you might grow the best carrots or the grass finished cows that have the best tasting meats. Those are all like skills. So on your screen right now are what I feel like really great ways of tying in some of those sources of uniqueness. And I want you all to just take a few minutes and look at that and tell me what you see. What are some of the sources of uniqueness that are being featured here on your screen? Well, I'm seeing here the Homegrown by Heroes label, right? I'm seeing pasture raised. I'm seeing be local, buy local, support local. So a lot of the values that are in that you all have been talking about over the last couple of weeks, they're being identified and put into a marketing message. And so let me see if anybody put anything. Social media, variety of egg color, pasture. Yeah, all of this great stuff. Great stuff. 5 different colored eggs. I love that. Okay, great. So so let's talk about that marketing message and how you can think about that and put it into your own personal marketing or farm marketing message, right? So first of all, keep it simple. You can't get more simple than this, right? These logos are examples of like a really simple, our formatter here at INCAT always says, try to have like 3 colors in your logo. But if you have more than that, then it makes it really hard and expensive to print. So Mannix Family Grass Finished Beef, they talk about their grass finish. That's one of the things that people look for a lot these days, but they have a really simple 3-color logo. Glacier Tilth Farm here in Montana, they have just basically a picture of their beautiful view from their farm and a really simple logo. Here's an example of a really versatile and scalable logo. So County Rail Farm, they have, they can, easily write it on a chalkboard. It's on this person's t-shirt, but it also can be scaled up to a big banner. And you see it everywhere they do a lot of wholesale production as well. And so it's on their labels in black and white on their like lettuce mixes and stuff. These folks, Harlequin Organic Produce, have a beautiful logo, and they've tied their logo into their signature tent colors, so folks can find them at the farmers market and they know exactly where they're looking. But at the same time, this logo is super expensive to print, so it's something to, you know, really take into consideration when you're thinking about your logos and how to, you know, tell your story through your logo and your marketing message. So here's a list of common marketing tools. But when you're looking at these lists, you know, consider your time and resource when it comes to these tools. Some of them some are much more effective and cheaper than others. For example, traditional media is very expensive, and you're not really sure if you're reaching that ideal customer that we were just talking about, right? And then of course, social media is important, but then you have to have those skills to make that happen. Some other marketing tools to consider are, we have here in Montana, we have a local foods producer and buyer commerce day. And that can be a really great time for you to connect with buyers and get your, you know, marketing message out there. Another way to do that is that local food directory. It's not only a great place for you to find those market channels, it's also a great way to get the word out about your farm. And a lot of farmers markets have like profiles of the farmers and all of that. So those are really great ways to get that message out. Another thing to think about also is think about the way that the frequency that you're getting your message out. So even if you're in the off season, try to tie those activities into those farm-based activities, because people really do want to know about you and your farm. So obviously social media is a really great way to do that, but you can get that marketing message out even in the off season. Like, you know, here's Strike Farms, you know, they're getting the hype up about their customizable CSA share, or these folks are like, yeah, we're going out and we're camping, but we're also getting farm supplies, you know, just making it real. So people really want to know that. So so now I want you folks to do a little bit of work, right? So we've talked about who your customer is, what are those marketing channels, who is your competition within those marketing channels, and how are you going to set yourself apart? Carlos is going to break you folks out. All right, I think everybody's back. And so hopefully that was a useful exercise for you to get practicing. And so let's talk about telling or selling your farm stories. So whether you're marketing through a retailer or direct through a farmer's market or a CSA, telling your story helps your customers connect with you and create a desire to actually invest in you and your farm. So this is a picture of Lance Barnes. He attended our 2017 Arm to Farm in Montana, and they have a wonderful story to tell. And they also sell miniature Jersey cows. And so their story was featured on the Homegrown by Heroes webpage, but they went and took that story and put it on their own webpage and their social media. So thinking about telling your story is a way to get that investment, but also think about a way to do it that is replicable and helps multiple audiences identify and invest in your product. So this toolkit is wonderful, and it's been developed by the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. And it incorporates many of the principles that you've been talking about, those values that and the whole farm planning session, the way those assets that we've talked about today. And there's lots of tools in this resource to help you think about how you can share your farm story through like print materials, press, and social media. So once you start going through and thinking about your story and how that kind of gets into how you can create a logo and all of that, you having resources to do that is important, but it can get kind of expensive, right? So Canva is a wonderful resource. I'm sure many of you on this call have used this, but I actually am just discovering Canva, but they do have a lot of just pre-made products that you can utilize. But a lot of their marketing materials do require, they do require some form of payment, but it's pretty inexpensive compared to like a graphic design service. So definitely something to consider. And then finally, like when it comes to like printing and all that kind of stuff, I use Printing to do like my business cards and then the yard signs for my new pick that I've been doing. But I wanted to, cue the room. We only have like 5 minutes or so, but what services have you folks used in getting your logos developed and all of that? Just thought I'd cue the room and see what you all have to share. Those are my resources. Has anybody used Canva here?
I use Canva for various things. It's easy to use. If I can use it, anybody can use it. I was also going to say, I think we have a recorded presentation we can maybe add to Teachable of Robin sharing. Robin's not here tonight, but Robin shares a lot of really good resources for printing and logo design and other branding things. And so I'll find that. I think we have it recorded from our virtual training and put that with this in Teachable as well.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, Stephanie has had her hand up.
We used the website Fiverr to create our logo and worked with someone to make it really what we wanted.
And they also trademark your logo at the same time.
Yeah, I know that's one that Robin recommends in her presentation is Fiverr. So thanks.
Awesome. Miss Mel?
I think sometimes too, maybe like a local artist might help you too with the logo. I have one that does like these mini zines and does botanical artwork. So she's going to be helping me with the logo that I'll be able to use on like cards and my social media sites. So that's something to consider too. And sometimes you can barter with them. Depending on how much they've blown up, you can barter with them. Like in the future, they might want some veggies or some from your farm or something like that, or even just for a small fee. So that's something to consider too. Like some of your local artists.
And that is exactly what I did. I did trade a couple of yearly flower subscriptions with a graphic artist to do my logo. So yeah, definitely consider bartering. That's a great idea.
Margot or someone, I totally blanking on the name, but I got it from Robin as well. But we used a company where we put out on this website our vision of a logo, and then artists from all over the world submit their images, and then if there's one we like, we sort of, you don't contract with them, but you accept them, and then you work out the rate and sort of go down that process. And depending on how much you want to pay, you're allowed like for at minimum up to like 3 changes. And then if I wanted to continue more and really immerse more in the conversation, then you just pay a little bit more. But I just can't think of the name. We could put it in Teachable, or I'll email it tomorrow. But it worked out really well for us. It just, the only downfall is it wasn't local. We ended up getting someone from somewhere else to help us with the design.
Yeah, that's how Fiverr works. That may be the one. There's others, and I know Robin has them in her presentation. So we'll find that and share.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's so hard to like cram it all in. So we go from big picture to like very specific. But yeah, now that you've kind of started thinking about channels and messaging and all that kind of stuff is when you really start thinking about that logo development. And I'm super glad that you're gonna put that presentation into Teachable. So, and my presentation will also be in Teachable tomorrow morning. Any other questions or anything related to marketing in the last few minutes?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. And as Tammy mentioned, she is going to be on next week's office hour, 12 to 1 o'clock on Tuesday, Eastern time. And her contact information is also in Teachable and on the ATRA NCAT website as well. And one thing I just wanted to follow up, Tammy, you mentioned on one of your slides, local harvest as a marketing source. I can't say enough about it. It's from the Maryland, Virginia area originally. We've used it for over 20 years. It used to be free, but now all of a sudden I think it's $20 yearly posting. But it's a highly visible place to list your farm and information about it. From a consumer end, I would say it's extremely popular and well worth the marketing money. So thank you. So on that note, we are at the top of the hour here. I want to thank you all so much for your time this evening. And as mentioned earlier, this is recorded and will be posted in the session for tonight's folder, along with a lot of the marketing resources that Tammy mentioned, both the tip sheets as well as individual publications on marketing. And so next week we're finishing up. We're going to have a session on urban soils and sort of intensive crop production. And then we're also going to dive into a presentation on urban agroforestry with our colleague, Catherine. So on that note, you can always reach out to us if you have any questions. And just as a reminder, it looks like Margot put the survey for tonight's session in the chat. As always, it's extremely helpful for us to just know what's working and what we can do better at. So please just take a few minutes to fill it out. I'll also include it in tomorrow's follow-up email, the link to it. But just really appreciate your time and input. And Tammy, thanks again for all of your help this evening and expertise in marketing. And on that note, I hope you all have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you either Tuesday at the office hour or at least for the session on Wednesday evening.